So that I am independent. I breakfast this morning at 9, and after glancing through the morning paper, I lightened my pipe and proceeded to let my mind wander in the hope that I might chance upon some subject for my pencil. The room, though door and windows were open, was oppressively hot, and I had just made up my mind that the coolest and most comfortable place in the neighborhood would be the deep end of the public swimming bath when the idea came. I began to draw. So intent was I on my work that I left my lunch untouched, only stopping work when the clock of St. Jude's struck 4. The final result, her hurried sketch, was, I felt sure, the best thing I had done. They showed a criminal in the dock immediately after the judge had pronounced sentence. The man was fat, enormously fat. The flesh hung in rolls about his chin. It creased his huge, stumpy neck. He was clean-shaven, perhaps I should say a few days before he must have been clean-shaven, and almost bald. He stood in the dock, his short, clumsy fingers clasping the rail, looking straight in front of him. The feeling that his expression conveyed was not so much one of horror as of utter, absolute collapse. There seemed nothing in the man strong enough to sustain that mountain of flesh. I rolled up the sketch and, without quite knowing why, placed it in my pocket. Then, with the rare sense of happiness which the knowledge of a good thing well done gives, I left the house. I believe that I set out with the idea of calling upon Trenton, for I remember walking around Lighton Street and turning to the right along Gilchrist Road at the bottom of the hill where the men were at work on the new tram lines. From there onwards, I have only the vaguest recollection of where I went. The only thing of which I fully conscious was the awful heat that came up from the dusty asphalt pavement as an almost palpable wave. I longed for the thunder promised by the great banks of copper-colored cloud that hung low over the western sky. I must have walked 5 or 6 miles when a small boy roused me from my reverie by asking time. It was 20 minutes to 7. When he left me, I began to take stock of my bearings. I found myself standing before a gate that led into a yard bordered by a strip of thirsty earth, where there were flowers, purple stalk, and scarlet geranium. Above the entrance was a board with the inscription, Chas Atkinson, monumental mason, worker in English and Italian marbles. From the yard itself came a cheery whistle, the noise of hammer blows, and the cold sound of steel meeting stone. A sudden impulse made me enter. A man sitting with his back towards me, busy at work on a slab of curiously veined marble. He turned around as he heard my steps, and I stopped short. It was the man I had been drawing, whose portrait lay in my pocket. He sat there, huge and elephantine, the sweat pouring from his scalp, which he wiped with a red silk handkerchief. But though the face was the same, the expression was absolutely different. He greeted me smiling, as if we were old friends, and shook my hand. I apologized for my intrusion. Ugh, everything is hot and glary outside. It seems an oasis of wilderness. I don't know about the oasis, but it's certainly hot. Hot as hell. Take a seat, sir. He pointed to the end of the gravestone on which he was at work, and I sat down. That's a beautiful piece of stone you got a hold of. In a way it is. The surface here is as fine as anything you could wish for, but there's a big flaw at the back. Though, I don't expect you to ever notice. I could never make really a good job of a bit of marble like that. But it'd be all right in the summer like this. I wouldn't mind the blasted heat, but wait till the winter comes. There's nothing quite like frost to find out the weak points in stone. Then, what's it for? You hardly believe me if I was to tell you, for an exhibition. And it's the truth. Artists have exhibitions. So do grocers and butchers. We have them too. All the latest little things and headstones, you know. He went on to talk of marbles, which sort best withstood wind and rain, and which were easiest to work. Then of his garden and a new sort of carnation he had bought. At the end of every other minute, he would drop his tools, wipe his shining head, and curse the heat. I said little, for I felt uneasy. There was something unnatural, uncanny, in meeting this man. I tried at first to persuade myself that I had seen him before, that his face, unknown to me, had found a place in some out-of-the-way corner of my memory. But I knew that I was practicing little more than a plausible piece of self-deception. Mr. Atkinson finished his work, spat on the ground, and got up with a sigh of relief. Ah, there. What do you think of that? The inscription, which I read for the first time, was this: Sacred to the memory of James Clarence Withencroft, born January 18th, 1860. He passed away very suddenly on August 20th, 19. In the midst of life, we are in death. For some time, I sat in silence, and a cold shudder ran down my spine. I asked him where he had seen the name. Oh, I didn't see it anywhere. I wanted some name, and I put down the first name that came into my head. How do you want to know? Oh, nothing. It's just a strange coincidence. But it happens to be my name. He gave a long, low whistle. And the dates? Oh, I can only answer for one of them, and that's correct. It's a rum go, he said. But he knew less than I did. I told him of my morning's work. I took the sketch from my pocket and showed it to him. As he looked, the expression of his face altered until it became more and more like that of a man I had drawn. And it was only the day before yesterday, he said, that I told Maria that there were no such things as ghosts. Neither of us had seen a ghost, but I knew what he meant. I mean, you probably heard my name. Yeah, and you must have seen me somewhere and have forgotten it. Were you at Clatkin at sea last year, in July? I had never been to Clacton in my life. We were silent for some time. We were both looking at the same thing. The 2 dates on the gravestone, and one was right. "Come inside and have some supper," said Mr. Atkinson. His wife is a cheerful little woman with the flaky red cheeks of the crunchy bread. Her husband introduced me as a friend of his who was an artist. The result was unfortunate, for after the sardines and watercress had been removed, he brought out a Dora Bible. And I had sit and express my admiration for nearly half an hour. I went outside and found Atkinson sitting on the gravestone smoking. We resumed the conversation at the point we had left off. You must excuse my asking, but do you know of anything you've done of which you could put on trial?" He shook his head. I'm not a bankrupt. The business is prosperous enough. 2 years ago, I gave turkeys to some of the guardians at Christmas. That's all I can think of. They were small ones too. He got up, fetched a can from the porch, and began to water flowers. Twice a day regular in the hot weather, and then the heat sometimes gets the better of the delicate ones. And ferns, good Lord, they could never stand it. "Where do you live?" I told him my address. It would take an hour's quick walk to get back home. "It's like this. We'll look at the matter straight. You go back home tonight, you take your chance of accidents. A car may run over you, and there's always banana skins and orange peels, to say nothing of fallen ladders." He spoke of the improbable with intense seriousness that would have been laughable 6 hours before. But I did not laugh. "The best thing we can do," he continued, "is for you to stay here till 12 o'clock. We'll go upstairs and smoke. It may be cooler inside." To my surprise, I agreed. We are sitting now in a long, low room beneath the eaves. Atkinson sent his wife to bed. He himself is busy sharpening some tools at a little oil stone, smoking one of my cigars the while. The air seems charged with thunder. I am writing this at a shaky table before the open window. The leg is cracked, and Atkinson, who seems a handy man with his tools, is going to mend it as soon as he has finished putting an edge on his chisel. It is after 11 now. I shall be gone in less than an hour. But the heat is stifling. It's enough to send a man mad. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our story. Yo, what is up, everybody? Your boy Esco back again. Another short horror story for you guys. This one is titled A School Story, written by M.R. James. Remember to use the links in the description below. Show love to the author, like, comment, and subscribe. Two men in a smoking room were talking about their private school days. At our school, we had a ghost footmark on the staircase. What was it like? Oh, very unconvincing. Just the shape of a shoe with a square toe, if I remember right. The staircase was a stone one. I never heard any story about the thing. That seems odd when you think about it. Why didn't somebody invent one? Yeah, you can never tell with little boys. They have a mythology of their own. Yeah, there's a subject for you. The folklore of private schools. Ah, yes. Crop is rather scanty though, I imagine. If you were to investigate the cycle of ghost stories, for instance, which the boys of private schools tell each other, it will all turn out to be a highly compressed version of stories out of books. Nowadays, the Strand and Pearsons and so on would be extensively drawn upon. No doubt. They weren't born or thought of in my time. Let's see. Wonder if I can remember the staple ones that I was told. Okay, first, there was the house with the room, in which a series of people insisted on passing a night. And each of them, in the morning, was found kneeling in the corner and had just time to say, "I've seen it," and died. Wasn't that the house in Berkeley Square? I dare say it was. Then there was the man who heard a noise in the passage at night, opened his door, and saw something crawling towards him on all fours with eyes hanging out of his cheek. There was, besides, let me think. Ah, yes, the room where a man was found dead in bed, with a horseshoe mark on his forehead, and the floor under the bed was covered with marks of horseshoes as well. I don't know why. Also, there was a lady who, unlocking her bedroom door in a strange house, heard a thin voice among the bedroom curtains say, "Now we're shut in for the night." None of those had any explanation or sequel. Wonder if they go on still, those stories. Oh, likely enough, with additions from the magazines, as I said. You never heard, did you? Of a real ghost at a private school? I thought not. Nobody that I know has ever come across one. Well, from the way you said it, I gather that you have. I really don't know. But this is what is on my mind. It happened at my private school 30 odd years ago, and I haven't had any explanation of it. The school, was near London. It was established in a large and fairly old house. A great white building with very fine grounds about it. There were large cedars in the garden, as there are in so many of the older gardens in the Thames Valley, and ancient elms in the 3 or 4 fields which we used for our games. I think probably it was quite an attractive place. But boys seldom allow that their schools possess any tolerable features. I came to the school in September, soon after the year 1870. And among the boys who arrived on the same day was one whom I took to. A Highland boy, whom I will call MacLeod. I need to spend time in describing him. The main thing is that I got to know him very well. He was not an exceptional boy in any way. Not particularly good at books or games, but he suited me. The school was a large one. There must have been from 120 to 130 boys there as a rule, and so a considerable staff of masters were required, and there were rather frequent changes among them. One term, perhaps it was my 3rd or 4th, a new master made his appearance. His name was Samson. He was a tallish, stoutish, pale, black-bearded man. I think we liked him. They had traveled a good deal and had stories which amused us on our school walks. That there was some competition among us to get within an earshot of him. I remember too, dear me. I have hardly thought of it since then. And he had a charm on his watch chain that attached to my attention one day. And he let me examine it. It was, I now suppose, a gold Byzantine coin. There was an effigy of some absurd emperor on one side, and the other side had been worn practically smooth. And he had a cut on it, rather barbarously. His own initials, GWS, and a date, July 24th, 1865. Yes, I can see it now. He told me he had picked it up in Constantinople, and it was about the size of a florin, perhaps rather smaller. Well, the first hot thing that happened was this. Samson was doing Latin grammar with us, one of his favorite methods. Perhaps it is a rather good one, was to make us construct sentences out of our own heads to illustrate the rules he was trying to make us learn. Of course, that is a thing which gives a silly boy a chance of being impertinent. There are lots of school stories in which that happens, or anyhow, there might be. But Samson was too good a disciplinarian for us to think of trying that on with him. Now, on this occasion, he was telling us how to express remembering in Latin, and he'd order us each to make a sentence bringing in the verb memini, I remember. Well, most of us made some ordinary sentence such as, I remember my father, or he remembers his book, or something equally uninteresting. And I dare say, a good many put down memino librum meum, and so forth. And the boy I mentioned, McLeod, was eventually thinking of something more elaborate than that. The rest of us wanted to have our sentences passed to get on to something else. Someone kicked me under the desk, and I, who was next to him, poked him and whispered to him, look sharp. But he didn't seem to attend. I looked at his paper and saw he had put nothing at all. So I jogged him again harder than before and upbraided him sharply for keeping us all waiting. That did have some effect. He started and seemed to wake up. And then very quickly he scribbled about a couple of lines on his paper and showed it up to the rest. As it was the last, or nearly the last, come in, and as Samson had a good deal to say about to the boys who had written Memeniscus Patrimeo, and the rest of it, turned out the clock struck 12 before he had got to McLeod. McLeod had to wait afterwards to have his sentence corrected. There was nothing much going on outside when I got out, so I waited for him to come. He came very slowly when he did arrive, and I guess there had to be some sort of trouble. So I said, "What'd you get?" "Oh, I don't know. Nothing much, but I think Samson's rather sick of me." "Why? Did you show him up some rot?" "Ah, no fear. It was all right, as far as I could see. It was like this. Memento. That's right. Enough for remember. And it takes a genitive. Memento, pute, inter, quator taxos. What silly rot. What made you shove that down? What does that even mean? I'm not quite sure what it does mean. All I know is just came to my head and I corked it down. I know what I think it means, because just before I wrote it down, I had some sort of picture of it in my head. I believe it means remember, the well among the four. What are those dark sort of trees that have red berries on them? Mountain ashes, I suppose you mean. I never heard of them. No, I'll tell you, use. Well, and what did Samson say? Why, he was jolly odd about it. When he had read it, he got up and went to the mantelpiece and stopped quite a long time without saying anything. And then he said, without turning around and rather quiet, "What do you suppose that means?" I told him what I thought, only I couldn't remember the name of the silly tree. And then he wanted to know why I put it down. And I had to say something or other. And after that, he left off talking about it and asked me how long I'd been here and where my people lived and things like that. And then I came away. But he hasn't looked a bit well. I don't remember any more that was said by either of us about this. And the next day, McLeod took to his bed with a chill or something of the kind. And it was a week or more before he was in school again. And as much as a month went by without anything happening that was noticeable, McLeod had thought. He didn't show it. Pretty sure, of course now, that there was something very curious in his past history, but I'm not going to pretend that we boys were sharp enough to guess any such thing. There was one other incident of the same kind at the last, which I told you. Several times since that day, we had to make up examples in school to illustrate different rules. But there have never been any row except when we did them wrong. At least there came a day when we were going through those dismal things which people call conditional sentences, and we were told to make a conditional sentence expressing a future consequence. We did it, right or wrong, and showed up our bits of paper, and Samson began looking through them. All at once, he got up, made some odd sort of noise in his throat, and rushed out by the door that was just by his desk. We sat there for a minute or two, and then, I suppose it was incorrect, but we went up. I, one, and two others. And look at the papers at his desk. Of course, thought someone must have put down some nonsense or other, and Samson had gone off to report him. All the same, I noticed that he hadn't taken any of the papers with him when he ran out. Well, the top paper on the desk was written in red ink, which no one used. And it wasn't in anyone's hand who was in this class. They all looked at it, McLeod and all, and took their dying oaths that it wasn't theirs. And then I thought of counting the bits of paper, and of this I made quite certain, that there were 17 bits of paper on the desk, and 16 boys in the form. Well, I bagged the extra paper and kept it, and I believe I have it now. And now you will want to know what was written on it, right? It was simple enough and harmless enough, I should have said. Si tu non veneris ad me, ego veniam a te. Which means, I suppose, if you don't come to me, I'll come to you. Could you show me the paper? Interrupted the listener. Yes, I could, but there's something odd about the thing. Same afternoon, I took it out of my locker. I know for certain it was the same bit, but I made a finger mark on it, and no single trace of writing of any kind was on it. I kept it, as I said, and since that time, I have tried various experiments to see whether sympathetic ink had been used, but obviously without result. So much for that. And after about half an hour, Samson looked in again, and he had felt very unwell and told us we might go. He came rather gingerly to his desk and gave us one look at the utmost paper, and I suppose he thought we must have been dreaming. Anyhow, he asked no questions. That day was half holiday, and the next day Samson was in school again, much as usual. The night the third and last incident in my story happened. We, McLeod and I, slept in a dormitory at right angles with the main building. Samson slept in the main building on the first floor. There was a very bright full moon. At an hour which I can't tell exactly, sometime between 1 and 2, I was woken up by somebody shaking me. It was McLeod. In a nice state of mind he seemed to be in, said, Come, there's a burglar getting in through Samson's window. As soon as I could speak, I said, Well, why not call out and wake everybody up? No. I'm not sure who it is. Don't make a row. Come on, come and look. Naturally, I came and looked, and naturally, there was no one there. I was cross enough and should have called McLeod plenty of names. Only, I couldn't tell why. It seemed to me that there was something wrong. Something that made me very glad I wasn't alone to face it. We were still at the window, looking out, and as soon as I could, I asked him what we had seen or heard. Well, I didn't hear anything at all. About 5 minutes before I woke you, I found myself looking out his window, and there was a man sitting and kneeling on Samson's windowsill, looking in. What sort of man? I don't know, but I can tell you one thing. He was beastly thin, and he looked as if he was wet all over. And looking around and whispering, he said, I'm not sure it's alive. He went on talking in whispers some time longer, and eventually crept back to bed. No one else in the room woke or stirred the whole time. I believe we did sleep a bit afterwards, but we were very cheap next day. The next day, Mr. Samson was gone, not to be found, and I believe no trace of him has ever come to light since. In thinking it over, one of the oddest things about it all has seemed to me to be the fact that neither McLeod nor I ever mentioned what we had seen to any third person whatsoever. Of course, no questions were asked on the subject, and if they had been, I'm inclined to believe that we could not have made any answer. We seemed unable to speak about it. That is my story. The only approach to a ghost story connected at a school that I know. But still, I think an approach to such a thing. The sequel to this, perhaps, be reckoned highly conventional, but a sequel there is, and so it must be produced. There had been more than one listener to the story, and in the latter part of the same year or the next one such listener was staying at a country house in Ireland. One evening, his host was turning over a drawer full of odds and ends in the smoking room. Suddenly, he put his hands upon a little box. "Now, you know about old things. Tell me, what is this?" My friend opened the little box and found it in a thin gold chain with an object attached to it. He glanced at the object and then took off his spectacles to examine it more narrowly. "What's the history of this?" Odd enough," was the answer. "You know, the yew thicket and the shrubbery. Well, a year or two back, we were cleaning out the old well that used to be in the clearing there. What do you suppose we found?" "Is it possible that you found a body?" "We did that, but what's more, in every sense of the word, we found two." "Good heavens, two? Was there anything to show how they got there? Was this thing found with them?" It was. Amongst the rags of the clothes that were on the bodies. A bad business, whatever the story of it may have been. One body had the arms tight around each other. It must have been there 30 years or more. Long enough before we came to this place. You may judge we filled the well up fast enough. Do you make anything of what's cut on the gold coin you have there? I think I can. Holding it to the light, it seems to be EWS, July 24th, 1865. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our story. Yo, what is up, everybody? The boy Esco, back again with another short horror story for you guys. This one is titled Ancient Lights, written by Algernon Blackwood. Remember to use the links in the description below. Show love to the author, like, comment, and subscribe. From Southwater, where he left the train, the road led due west. That he knew. For the rest, he trusted to luck, being one of those born walkers who disliked asking the way. He had that instinct, and as a rule, it served him well. Okay, a mile or so due west along the sandy road till you come to a stile on the right. Then across the fields, you'll see the red house straight before you. He glanced at the postcard's instructions once again, and once again he tried to decipher the scratched-out sentence without success. It had been so elaborately inked over that no word was legible. Inked-out sentences in a letter were always enticing. He wondered what it was that had to be so very carefully obliterated. The afternoon was boisterous, with the tearing, shouting wind that blew from the sea across the Sussex Weald. Massive clouds with rounded, piled-up edges cannon across gaping spaces of blue sky. Far away, the line of down swept the horizon like an arriving wave. Chanctonbury Ring rode their crest, a scudding ship, all down before the wind. He took his hat off and walked rapidly, breathing great draughts of air with delight and exhilaration. The road was deserted. No horsemen, bicycles, or mortars. Not even a tradesman cart. No single walker. But anyhow, he would never have asked the way. Keeping a sharp eye for the stile, he pounded along, while the wind tossed the cloak against his face and made waves across the blue puddles in the yellow road. The trees showed their underleaves of white. The bracken and the high new grass bent all one way. Great life was in the day, high spirits and dancing everywhere. And for a Croydon surveyor's clerk just out of an office, this was like a holiday at sea. It was a day for high adventure, and his heart rose up to meet the mood of nature. His umbrella with the silver ring ought to have been a sword, and his brown shoes should have been top boots with spurs upon the heels. Where hid the enchanted castle and the princess with the hair of sunny gold? His horse. The stile suddenly came into view and nipped adventure in the bud. Everyday clothes took him prisoner again. He was a surveyor's clerk, middle-aged, earning £3 a week, coming from Croydon to see about a client's proposed alterations in a wood something to ensure a better view from the dining room. Across the fields, perhaps a mile away, he saw the red house gleaming in the sunshine, and resting on the stile a moment to get his breath, he noticed a copse of oak and hornbeam on the right. Aha! Well, this must be the wood he wants to cut down to improve the view. I'll have a look at it. There were boards up, of course, but there was an inviting little path as well. Not a trespasser, then. Part of my business, this is. He scrambled awkwardly over the gate and entered the copse. A little round would bring him to the field again. But the moment he passed among the trees, the wind ceased shouting, and the stillness dropped upon the world. So dense was the growth that the sunshine only came through in isolated patches. The air was close. He mopped his forehead, put his green felt hat on, but a low branch knocked it off again. And as he stopped, an elastic twig swaying back struck his face. There were flowers along both edges of the little path. Glades open either side. Ferns curved about in damper corners, and the smell of earth and foliage was rich and sweet. It was cooler here. What an enticing little wood, he thought, turning down all small green glade where sunshine flickered like silver wings. How it danced and fluttered and moved about. He put a blue dark flower in his buttonhole. Again, his hat, caught by an oak branch as he rose, was knocked from his head, falling across his eyes. And this time, he did not put it back on. Swinging his umbrella, he walked on with uncovered head, whistling rather loudly as he went. But the thickness of the trees hardly encouraged whistling. Something of his gaiety, high spirits, seemed to leave him. Found himself suddenly treading circumspectly with a caution. The stillness on the wood was so peculiar. There was a rustle among the ferns and leaves. Something shot across the path 10 yards ahead. Stopped abruptly an instant, head cocked sideways to stare, then dived again beneath the underbush with the speed of a shadow. There was a rustle among the ferns and leaves, and something shot across the path 10 yards ahead. Stopped abruptly, instant, head cocked sideways to stare, then dived again beneath the underbush with the speed of a shadow. He started like a frightened child, laughing the next second that a mere pheasant could have made him jump. The distance, he heard wheels upon the road, and wondered why the sound was pleasant. Ah, good old butcher's cart, he said to himself, then realized that he was going in the wrong direction and had somehow got turned around. For the road should be behind them, not in front. And he hurriedly took another narrow glade that lost itself in greenness to the right. Ah, that's my direction, of course. The trees has mixed me up a bit, it seems. Then he found himself abruptly by a gate he had first climbed over. He had merely made a circle. Surprise became almost discomfiture then, and a man dressed like a gatekeeper, brown and green, leaned against the gate, hitting his legs with the switch. Hey, I'm making for Mr. Looney's farm. This is his wood, I believe. Then stopped dead, because it was no man at all, but merely an effect of light, shade, and foliage. He stepped back to reconstruct the singular illusion, but the wind shook the branches roughly here on the edge, and the foliage refused to reconstruct the figure. Leaves all rustled strangely, and just then the sun went behind the cloud, making the whole wood look otherwise. Yet how the mind could be thus doubly deceived was indeed remarkable, for it almost seemed to him the man had answered, spoken, or was it the shuffling noise the branches made, and had pointed with his switch to the notice board upon the nearest tree. The words rang in his head, but of course he had imagined them. No, it's not his wood, it's ours. And some village wit, moreover, had changed the lettering to the weather-beaten board, for it read quite plainly, trespassers will be persecuted. And while the astonished clerk read the words and chuckled, he said to himself, thinking what a tale he'd have to tell his wife and children later. The blooming wood has tried to chuck me out, but I'll go in again. Why? It's only a matter of a square acre at most. I'm bound to reach the fields on the other side if I keep straight on. He remembered his position in the office. He had a certain dignity maintained. The cloud passed from below the sun, and light splashed suddenly in all manner of unlikely places. The man went straight on. He felt a touch of puzzling confusion somewhere. This way, the copse had a shifting from sunshine and shadow, doubtless troubled sight a little. To his relief at last, a new glade opened through the trees and disclosed the fields with a glimpse of the red house in the distance at the far end. But a little wicket gate that stood across the path had first to be climbed, and as he scrambled heavily over, for it would not open, he got the astonishing feeling that it slid off sideways beneath his weight and towards the wood. Like the moving staircases at Harrod's and Errol's court, it began to glide off with him. It was quite horrible. He made a vital effort to get down, for it carried him into the trees. But his feet became entangled with the bars and umbrella, so that he fell heavily upon the farther side. Arms spread across, grass and nettles, boots clutched between the first and second bars. He lay there, and while he struggled to get disentangled, feet, bars, and umbrella formed a regular net. He saw the little man, browny green, go past him with extreme rapidity through the wood. The man was laughing. He passed across the glade some 50 yards away. He was not alone this time. Companion like himself went with him. The clerk, now upon his feet again, watched him disappear into the gloom of green beyond. Ugh, they're tramps, not gamekeepers. But his heart was thumping dreadfully, and he dared not utter all his thought. He examined the wicket gate, convinced it was a trick gate somehow, then went hurriedly on again, disturbed beyond belief to see that the glade no longer opened its fields, but curved away to the right. What in the world had happened to him? His sight was so utterly at fault. Again the sun flamed out abruptly and lit the floor of the wood with pools of silver, and at the same moment a violent gust of wind passed shouting overhead. Drops fell clattering everywhere upon the leaves, making a sharp pattering as of many footsteps. The whole copse shuddered and went moving. Rain, by George, thought the clerk, and feeling for his umbrella, discovered he had lost it. He turned back to the gate and found it lying on the farther side. To his amazement, he saw the fields at the far end of the glade, a red house too, ashine in the sunset. He laughed then, for of course, in his struggle with the gate, he had somehow got it turned around, had fallen back instead of forwards. Climbing over, this time quite easily, he retraced his steps. The silver band, he saw, had been torn from the umbrella. No doubt his foot, a nail, or something had caught in it and ripped it off. The clerk began to run. He felt extraordinarily dismayed. But while he ran, the entire wood ran with him, round him, to and fro, trees shifting like living things, leaves folding and unfolding, trunks darting backwards and forwards, and branches disclosing enormous empty spaces and closing up again before he can look into them. There were footsteps everywhere, and laughing, crying voices, crowds of figures gathering just behind his back till the glade he knew was thick with moving life. The wind in his ears, of course, produced the voices and the laughter, while sun and clouds plunging the copse, alternately in shadow and bright dazzling light, created the figures. But he did not like it, and went as fast as ever his sturdy legs could take him. He was frightened now. This was no story for his wife and children. He ran like the wind, but his feet made no sound upon the soft, mossy turf. Then, to his horror, he saw that the glade grew narrow. Nettles and weeds stood thick across it. It dwindled down to a tiny path. 20 yards ahead, it stopped finally and melted off among the trees. What the trick gate had failed to achieve, this twisting glade accomplished easily, carried him bodily among the dense, crowding trees. There was only one thing to do: turn sharply and dash back again, run headlong into the life that followed at his back, followed so closely that now it almost touched him, pushing him in. And with reckless courage, this was what he did. It seemed a fearful thing to do. He turned with a sort of violent spring, head down, shoulders forward, hands stretched before his face. He made the plunge. Like a hunted creature, he changed full tilt the other way, meeting the wind now in his face. Good Lord! The glade behind him had closed up as well. There was no longer any path at all. Turning round and round like an animal at bay, he searched for an opening, a way to escape. Searched frantically, breathlessly, terrified now in his bones. But foliage surrounded him. Branches blocked the way. The trees stood close and still, unshaken by a breath of wind, and the sun dipped that moment behind a great black cloud. The entire wood turned dark and silent. It watched him. Perhaps it was this final touch of sudden blackness that made him act so foolishly, as though he had really lost head. At any rate, without pausing to think, he dashed headlong in among the trees again. There was a sensation of being stiflingly surrounded and entangled, that he must break out at all costs. Out and straight into an oak that deliberately moved into his path to stop him. He saw it shift across the good full yard, and being a measuring man accustomed to his theodolite and chain, he ought to know. He fell, saw stars, and felt 1,000 tiny fingers tugging and pulling at his hands, neck, and ankles. Stinging nettles, no doubt, were responsible for this. He thought of it later. At the moment, he felt diabolically calculated. But another remarkable illusion was not so easily explained. For all in a moment, it seemed the entire wood went sliding past him, with a thick, deep rustling of leaves and laughter, myriad footsteps, and tiny little, active, energetic shapes. Two men in browny green gave him a mighty hoist, and he opened his eyes to find himself lying in the meadow beside the stile where first his incredible adventure had begun. The wood, in its usual place, stared down upon him in the sunlight. There was a red house in the distance as before. Above him grinned a weather being noticed board. Trespassers will be persecuted. Disheveled in mind and body, and a good deal shaken in his official soul, the clerk slowly walked across the fields. But on the way, he glanced once more at the postcard's instructions and saw with dull amazement that the inked-out sentence was quite legible after all beneath the scratches made across it. There is a shortcut through the wood. The wood I cut down. If you care to take it. Only care was so badly written. It looked like another word. The C was uncommonly like E. That's the copse that spoils my view of the downs, you see. His client explained to him later, pointing across the fields and referring to the ordnance map beside him. I want to cut it down, and a path made so. Fingers indicated directions on the map. The Fairywood, it's still called, and it's far older than this house. Come now, you're ready, Mr. Thomas. We might go out and have a look at it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our story. Yo, what is up, everybody? Boy Soresco. Again, another short horror story for you guys. This one is titled Dagon, written by H.P. Lovecraft. I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more. Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable. I can bear the torture no longer. I shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below. Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death. It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell victim to the Germans' derader. The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their latter degradation, so that our vessel was made legitimate prize. Whilst we, of her crew, were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners. So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time. When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south equator. Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight. The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days, I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land. But neither ship nor land appeared. I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous. When at last I awaked, it was to discover myself half sucked to a slimy expanse of hellish black mire which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I can see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished, for there was in the air and in the rotting soil a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish and of other less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with nauseating fear. The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black, its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet. As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions which for innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, strain my ears I might, nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead thing. For several hours I sat thinking and brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night, I slept but little, and the next day, I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vast sea and possible rescue. On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight and evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal. All day, I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation of the rolling desert. On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight and evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal. All day, I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert. That night, I encamped. On the following day, still traveled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it. By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance. Intervening valley, setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but eerie the waning, and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain. I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions I had experienced were too much for me to endure again. And in the glow of the moon, I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence. I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was the source of vague horror to me. But I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side to an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had yet soared high enough to illuminate. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into the fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscence of Paradise Lost and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfinished realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined. Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent, whilst after a drop of a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual. Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing to the Stygian deeps where no light had yet penetrated. All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply 100 yards ahead of me. An object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays, bending moon. That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself, but I was conscious of the distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express. For despite its enormous magnitude and its position in abyss that yawned at the bottom of the sea, the world was young. I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith whose massive bulk had known the worship, perhaps the worship, of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist or archaeologist's delight. I examined my surroundings more closely. The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions, and almost slapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculpture. The writing was in a system of hieroglyphic unknown to me, and unlike anything I had ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound. Plainly visible across the intervening water on account of their enormous size were an array of bas-reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of Dor. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creature was shown disporting like fishes in waters of some marine grotto, or paying homage at some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves. Well, of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint. Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bluer, they were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands, feet, shockingly wide, flabby lips, glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seem to have seemed chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background, for one of the creatures was shown the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe. Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born. Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of most erring anthropologists, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then, suddenly, I saw it. With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters. Vast, Polyphemus-like, and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head, gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little. I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to think. I have indistinct recollections of a great storm some time after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard peals of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods. When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital, brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing, nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe. Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, fish god, but soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries. It is at night, especially when the moon's gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease, and has drawn me to its clutches as its hopeless slave. Well, now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men. Often I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm, a mere freak of fever, as I lay sun-stricken and raving the open boat in my escaped German man-of-war. This, I ask myself, whatever does there come before me, a hideously vivid vision, and reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering the nameless things that at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols, carving their own detestable likenessness on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down in their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind, of a day when the land shall sink, the dark ocean floor shall send a mist, universal pandemonium. The end is near. I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it. It shall not find me, God. That hand, the window. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end. Yo, what is up, everybody? Your boy Esco, back again with another short horror story for you guys. This one is titled The Incident, written by J. King. Remember that all properties and rights belong to their respective authors. So please use the links in the description below. Show love and support to them. Like, comment, and subscribe. Dear Sir, I won't pretend to feel anything other than a deep dread at the receipt of your letter. How you came by my name and of my involvement in the mentioned incident causes me a great deal of consternation, considering the effort I have made over the years to hide my presence at the event. I have heard some tales of you, your position, and capabilities, and therefore find myself obliged to believe that you could easily follow through on your not-so-veiled threats. Though I'll admit that there's not much that could frighten me after that day. As you correctly stated, I was indeed in Vizai when the hikers passed through. After some trouble with the local government in my hometown, I was spending time on the down low, as I understand the expression is. I had not met the group before, but we had the chance to meet during the purchasing of food, and I found them friendly and forthcoming. And I'll admit that their little expedition seemed an enjoyable one to me, though I had not their experience climbing and mountaineering. My hesitation on whether to join them or not originally led me to start out alone on my own journey on a somewhat parallel route, though with a different destination. But I found myself oddly drawn to that intriguingly determined little group, and so eventually changed my mind and my path. They had taken the first part of their journey quite easily, and I was able to catch up with them in the highland area. Around, I believe, the 31st, after Eden had already departed the expedition due to injury. The lone female member of the group, Mila, seemed pleased